Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast for agency owners, hosted by agency veteran and coach Steve Guberman. Agency Bytes is a podcast focused on delivering actionable agency information from agency experts in about 25 minutes. Why 25 minutes? Because who has the attention span for much more these days? And you can squeeze in a listen between meetings with time for a bathroom break or coffee refill before your next meeting.
Welcome to Agency Bytes, a podcast dedicated to helping agency owners thrive. I'm Steve Guberman from Agency Outsight, where I coach creative entrepreneurs to build the agency of their dreams. Today I'm joined by Dan Englander. He's the CEO and founder of Schema, a fractional new business team for marketing agencies, and he hosts the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. Previously, Dan was the first employee head of new business at Idea Rocket, and before that, he was the account coordinator at DX Agency. He's also the author of Relationship Sales at Scale, How to Find Your Virtual Tribe and Reliably Grow Your Professional Service Business, Mastering Account Management and the B2B Sales Blueprint. In his spare time, he enjoys developing new aches and pains via Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu and spending time with his wife, Sarah, and their son, Adrian, in New York. It is really great to have you here, Dan. You're actually not my first Jiu-Jitsu rolling podcast guest. I had Chris Martinez on here. He also rolls. His wife does too.
Yeah. Well, I'm sorry to hear that. We'll try not to. One of those culty things that we all try to bring others into. So I won't do that today. Don't worry.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you're here. I think what you specialize in is super, super relevant now. And, with I think what we should probably dig into, and we typically don't approach this with any kind of preconceived thing, but tell me if I'm wrong, so many agencies rely too much on referrals for their growth of their business, and they don't strategically build a sales plan. They don't get it off the owner's plate, and that's where you come in, and that's kind of what your expertise is, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we're not the only ones that have identified this pain point. It's definitely out there, and I think most agencies that get to a certain point know they have it. The issue is what happens next and how a lot of them try to solve it. And we see a lot of people hand wringing and trying a million tactics, and kind of like a flashlight, like spreading the energy too far in too many directions, as opposed to being a laser about it. And that's often where we come in.
So when you say we come in, you and your team come into a marketing agency, branding firm, whatever, and tell the rest of that story for me.
For sure. So my background's originally agency-based, kind of first working on the account side, like led new business for a long time and tried every tactic under the sun to get business. And what we've sort of found is that there's not one right way to do it. I think that we're not, we focused on outreach, and inbound marketing is really good too. It's not about doing one or the other. But what we tend to find is that most agencies that have been around for a few years have tons of experience, right? They have this expertise. They can really help prospects, especially if they're either specialized or getting in the process of getting specialized. So with that in mind, and with the idea that hey, you're going after a market that isn't infinite, you really can start to be building these relationships proactively through outreach. And that's what we're typically helping clients do. So what we do when we work with a new client is lately, we started out by doing this for people. Over the last year, we've transitioned to more of a training and implementation model where we set up the right systems and show agency teams how to do outreach the right way, and get up to a handful of meetings a week pretty fast. So I can definitely get more into how we're thinking about outbound and the ways people kind of get it wrong, but I'll leave it at that for now.
Well, I think that's an important thing. Sure, lots of people are doing it wrong. They're relying on automated nonsense robots that are not personalizing things and not representing their business properly. The common, I guess, noise that I hear from owners is I don't know how to find the right people, and I just don't have time for it. And so I would imagine you hear similar complaints. I'm curious, what other kind of stumbling blocks do you hear from agency owners where they're trying to grow a system?
Yeah, it's interesting. So I think the two biggest stumbling blocks are lack of time and lack of clarity, right? Mm-hmm. So lack of time is another way of saying something else is taking precedence over this problem. The problem being getting out from referrals and getting you something that's more predictable, building equity value, all that good stuff. So the question is, what is that thing that's taking precedence over it? And often, sometimes there's some other internal sales and marketing initiative that can have legs, and that's totally cool. Other times, though, I'd say about 80% of the time, that other thing is just kind of status quo. It's, oh, we got this proposal. We got to go heads down on it. Oh, there's this fire
Hmm.
over here. Oh, there's this other thing. And really, that situation's never going to change unless people decide they're going to open up time for it. And usually that literally means owners saying, this is when I work on internal sales and marketing. Nothing shall impede on that, and so
Right.
on. So that's the time thing. The clarity thing is kind of interesting, and you kind of touched on it when you said, "Hey, I don't know which people, like a lot, or rather, a lot of agency owners don't know which people to go after."
Hmm.
Our whole thing is like reframing what outbound is. In the past, outbound has been framed as this set it and forget it lead generation machine. You check some boxes, you put in the tokens, and out comes the business. And there's
Right.
been a million companies that market themselves that way, a million methodologies. It almost always fails. The way we like to think about outbound is it often starts as a clarity building exercise. It's not even a lead gen exercise, right? If you're an agency, you might know exactly who you're going after, or you might not. But either way, you need to get that image sharper. You can get that image sharper by reading articles about whatever industry you're selling into, which is okay. Or you could literally have to build the names of the companies, the names of the people, and basically map your market, get it out in front of you from the beginning.
Hmm.
And that's 100 times more clarifying, is having to make these decisions. Yeah.
But back it up even a step before then. So that implies that they know the industries they want to work in. They know what niche and verticals that they serve, and that their positioning statements refer to. And many don't even know that. Many, I can be all things to all people, and we work across the board, and we're industry agnostic, which they think is a some sort of badge of honor. And so, I mean, are you guys working with them on that kind of stuff, or is it presumed they know who they are and what their differentiators are?
Yeah, good question. Like everybody's different. Some people know, other people are more vague. For the agencies that know less, maybe their clarity, the sharpness of their lens is 10% out of 100 as opposed to 90% out of 100. For those, we absolutely help them and use outbound as the way to help them by
Hmm.
actually having conversations in their field as opposed to just drawing on a whiteboard and guessing. So, for that agency you described, that's like, hey, we've worked with 5, 10 verticals, we do 20 services. One question we ask is like, where do you feel most confident helping? Like, if we
Hmm.
just airdropped you into the room with the VP of marketing at the fintech company or the CMO at the growth stage CPG firm, which one are you closing? Like, which one are you going to? And that kind of sharpens the image, and people are going to be like, well, it's one or the other. It's like, great. Well, there's a starting point. Often, what we're doing in our process is we're like, pick three. We're going to make three buckets of companies
Hmm.
for the agency that, let's say, they only work with CPG and they know exactly who they're going after. We still say pick three. Like, divide up those CPG companies in a way that lets you really personalize the outreach. So then you're saying, hey, beverage company between X and Y revenue, like I'm speaking to your problems more than some other, more than I could if I was just going wide. So
Hmm.
three's, the thing that's always magic about three is it's enough diversification for outreach, but it's also manageable. You're not going crazy selling to everyone under the sun. So
So you're further splitting their vertical into really nuanced buckets of audiences that they can really target with personalization based
exactly.
on their operate, that target audience's operation within the company, or their outreach to their, say, the beverage company, their consumer audience, or things like that. So that's an
Exactly. And
interesting
yeah,
point.
I'm an open book. Like I'll lay out our process soup to nuts. Like the first thing we do is we say, let us help you find three buckets of companies. You're not sure which ones, just take a guess. Just the ones you feel most comfortable with. If you're going after just one vertical, still think of that vertical in three different subdivisions on a company level. And then from there, we're helping people map out their whole market. So then they're basically like 99% accuracy and quality with the data.
Hmm.
Um, that's important. It's a little tedious, but it's worth it because that's what 99% of people aren't willing to do. And then that's why outreach doesn't work for them. And the good news is, while it's work up front, it's not work our clients are doing over and over and over again. They're doing it not once, but not very often.
Yeah.
So from there, we're saying basically map all the people that you think you might want to talk to across all of those companies. So you're doing all that work up front. And then the thing that makes this interesting is we're not huge believers in cold outreach. We're not saying we never do it. There's a way to make it work.
Mm-hmm.
But if we can, we want an unfair advantage, right? So what that means is selling where our clients already have trust. I'll go down a little rabbit hole, so I know I'm going
Yeah.
along with this answer. But our belief is that we're in a trust recession, especially for agencies and B2B service companies. For anything you could sell from a laptop with an internet connection based on the volume of competition for both noise and services, right? So our whole thing is like, let's identify the prospects that are already likely to trust our clients based on things they have in common. That could be as simple as locational connections, or it could be much more sophisticated, i.e., we've run campaigns where we're looking at people that went from one company and onto another and use that as so I'll leave it at that. Those kind of how we're thinking about the data side of things.
Interesting. Okay. So looking for commonalities, using those for this trust economy that you're talking about. Do you lean into like alumni, college alumni groups, things like that also, or no?
We have in the past. Tactically, there's a million ways to do it. Sometimes we're looking at friends of friends. We had a campaign where we found expats from the UK, like our client. The idea is a lot of the times, like when let me back up a little bit. When our clients are doing creative work for their clients, they understand that there's a lot of irrationality that goes into how we make decisions. Like we're making decisions emotionally. When we get into the B2B world and we are trying to sell things and get people on calls, we forget that lesson a lot of the times. We want to pretend everything's rational. We want to say, well, if only I could get them to read this white paper, if only I could just lay out our value prop in perfect detail, they'll take the meeting with me. That's not really what works, though. What we tend to see is that the reason people take meetings with strangers is that they feel either consciously or unconsciously that they're not complete strangers, right? They feel that there's something different about this outreach, and this person might be in my tribe on either a business or personal level. This can happen through subtlety, right? Like if you're an agency and you focus on the healthcare space, there's just little things that you're going to communicate differently by knowing that vertical than you would if you're an outsider. And all these things tend to add up, the connections, the personalization. And a lot of what we're trying to get across with the message is the kind of vibe of what most agency owners are doing all day, every day. They're just not doing it with leverage, right? Which is like you've met somebody at a conference, you've done work in their field, and you're reconnecting with them. A lot of the vibe is very similar to that. It's just done it with leverage and relative scale, basically.
So use that last example you just mentioned. So I'm at a conference, I meet a zillion people. Do you help build a follow-up strategy, or you've got a list of 400 people that you were given from attending a list, or you set up a booth from attending a conference, or you set up a booth at a conference? Do you help build out like an outreach system for them? Like what's your guidance there?
We've done versions of that, but more of what we're up to is getting people acquainted that haven't been acquainted before. Right?
Okay.
So what we have done is there's clients of ours that are going to conferences all the time. So we might help them build a campaign that's like, well, let's find the 100 or 200 prospects that are local to that conference, and you set up meetings with them before, during, or after it. And you might be thinking logistical, hey, I don't have time or whatever. It doesn't matter. The fact is, the fact that you know about that conference and are going is already miles above what 99% of people are doing with outreach, right? So it's not going to work on everyone, but we're not going for that. The idea is that most people are going to say, okay, you know about this conference, you might be in my world. Like I might be able to trust you through this signal, as opposed to having to read reams of sales collateral, which no one will ever do at the top, at least not at the top of the funnel. Yeah.
Yeah. So using these, metrics, not even metrics, these signals that say we're somehow in the same tribe, we're somehow connected. That's not cold outreach, but you're building a sequence of what is kind of cold, let's say warm outreach, to start communications, build relationships, build rapport for their sales system, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And a lot of it is some of it's just blocking and tackling and getting the data and the copyright too. But that's actually a huge part of it, is having that right process that's manageable for a small team, right? Because most agencies we work with, there's an owner that's trying to do sales alongside a million other things. If they're lucky and they get to a certain level, they might have one salesperson that's probably also doing a million other things. So there's all sorts of tactics. There's, all sorts of outreach, B2B sales stuff going on. The issue is most of it's sort of framed around like a funded tech company or a company that has all these resources and all this stuff, where it's really like you need to build some pretty targeted campaigns to the right people and open doors in a way that's not going to take a million hours a
Yeah.
week. So there's definitely, I'm not saying there's not time involved, anything meaningful, there's time.
Sure.
Having that process and being able to just repeat it over and over again. Yeah.
And are you guys fans of automation for agency owners? Again, they know the audience now. Let's say they pull a list out of Sales Navigator or Apollo or any of these tools. This messaging you're talking about, this blocking, tackling messaging, is that an automated process, or are you doing it manually, or
Yeah,
what's that all about?
everything's automated. The thing that makes it different is our process is based on doing the upfront work, both so that you get clarity and so that you have quality in, quality out, right? It's not unlike any other manufacturing process where they have,
Yeah.
I forgot what it's called. Those are the Toyota ripcord when something's broken and they just pause the whole conveyor belt. I forgot what.
Okay. I don't know that.
In Japan they invented it, I think. But that's the thing that makes this work, is so that you're getting on this level where like all the companies and all the people are right, and then that creates this sort of virtuous cycle where like even if somebody's not ready to talk to you, they're not mad at you. They're more likely to keep you in their inbox as opposed to hitting spam, and that
Right.
means they're getting better opens and getting better campaigns going and getting more meetings and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. What percentage of shops are you working with that you would say are owner-led sales versus they've got a person or a team in place?
Good question. I'd say it's at least 70-80% of the clients we work with have owner-led sales. And that's even been in the history of the business. That's even sometimes been in large agencies with like 50
Mm-hmm.
people. Um, but I would also take that to say that just because, that happens a lot doesn't mean it isn't completely feasible to get out of the sales seat. The agents, we see agencies do it all the time. We help a lot of them do it. I think the thing that I've used this metaphor a million times, it's a little cheesy, but it's really about hiring the driver once you have the car, not the other way around. Otherwise, then you have an expensive driver sitting around, sitting on their hands
Yeah.
without much to do. So,
All right. So then just to break that down, the car is the sales system, not the salesperson. The driver is the salesperson.
exactly.
So build
Yeah.
that system and then plug a person into it. I get a ton of owners that they're in charge of Rev. And they're like, I just want to buy a salesperson. It's like, you can't just plug somebody into everything's in your brain.
Exactly. And look, I've gotten this wrong half a dozen times over the years, and
Mm-hmm.
I'm back selling again because we've transitioned to this training model over the last year, so I need to be back into it to fine tune things. I think though, like a lot of the times, people will sort of trick themselves. I think there's two ways that people hire the salesperson prematurely. They either do it when things are really good and they're like, we're getting all these leads, we're getting all these proposals, we're closing deals. Like, I don't really want to be in sales anymore. It's not that fun. I'll get somebody else to do it.
Yeah.
And then you have a regression to the mean or even below the mean. And then you're stuck with this $100,000+ person, and they probably don't have what it takes to build the systems. They might be a good salesperson, they might not, but they're not entrepreneurial. So
Yep.
they're not going to do that. And then on the other hand, people will hire salespeople when the things are down. And they're like, I just don't want to be on another sales call. I'll just outsource this, right?
Yeah.
There's plenty of salespeople that will take your money to do that.
Yeah, I don't think it can be a last ditch effort. I think it's got to be very strategically built and planned for, and it's an expensive investment. There's creative ways to fund it, whether it's part base, part commission, whatever. But talk about what you guys see as like the steps to building that car for getting it
Totally.
off the owner's brain.
Yeah, so we have a fancy graphic, and not to plug us too much, there's a video training I can talk about at the end that goes through this. But we sort of see these different stages. Like stage one is like the glorified freelancer, and that's when the way most agencies start is by
Mm-hmm.
accident. People decide, okay, I'm not a freelancer, I'm a business, and then they go on to stage two. And that involves getting fulfillment off of an owner's plate so that they can do other things. Stage two is where we see probably 70-80% of the agencies we work with, even ones that are getting well into the 7-figure level. And that's the cobbler's children. That's what we call it. That should be well known. Hey, we were really good at marketing our clients, not so much ourselves. This is the situation where most of the business comes from referrals. It's unpredictable and so on. This is where we're helping build the systems. And I think at the cobbler's children phase, you might have good months or good quarters. And that's where it takes the discipline to sort of like fully catch the wave in order to know you're ready to hire that salesperson. So to answer your question, what does it look like? This is where we see people kind of go to stage 3, which is what we call the transitional agency, where you could either backslide back to cobbler's children, or you could keep going until you get to the enterprise, which is where you have both inbound and outbound functioning. Lead flow is relatively predictable, and you can really, really support a salesperson. So at that transitional phase, a few building blocks are, repeatable systems. We're looking to help on the outbound side. There's other great people like yourself, I think, that are helping on the inbound side. What it takes is on the hardest part, but is completely doable, is getting lead flow up to a level that's probably like 50% above what you need it to be, right? Because you need somebody else to sell less well than you do. And you also just need to make sure you've caught that wave and that the regression to the mean is going to be enough to sustain you and the salesperson. What doesn't work is, hey, I'm going to go hire somebody with a Rolodex, or I'm going to get intros for my Rolodex and feed them to somebody else. That's tougher to make work. Yeah. So that's kind of what we've seen anyway. It's been our experience.
Yeah, you definitely can't say, bring some clients along and I'll hire you. Or, I mean, you can, but it's a very short-lived fuse there. And a lot of the relationships, for an agency are built on the owner's back. And so it's their Rolodex, their LinkedIn connections, friends and family, et cetera. And so you can't pass that off to a new in-house salesperson either. But that process, if you've built that step-by-step, here's how we engage with people on social, here's what we do at events, here's how we do cold or warm outreach. Once that's built, you can plug somebody in. But I love that the metric of 50% above the mean, so that you know that you've got just a good, healthy pipeline, that you're not dependent on this person for, what would you say, 3 to 6 months, or how long till you can hopefully rely on this person?
Yeah, there's different schools of thought on this. I guess what I would aim for is double the length of your sales cycle, right? Here's the catch, is that you may not actually know the length of your sales cycle. You might think you know it, but it might not be right. Because if you're used to referrals, you're not actually seeing your sales cycle. You're seeing people when they are solution aware.
Yep.
And it still might take a long time from there, if it's a big company especially or whatever. But really the way to measure it is you could definitely measure it from the awareness stage. That's harder. Even just measuring it from the first touch point you have with them, the first conversation, is different than when somebody is getting referred because they've said, hey, so-and-so, I need this. And then they say, go talk to this person over here. So it's probably longer than you think it is. And then to train a salesperson, they're going to need time and ramp up. So usually it's double that. So depending on the offering, you're looking at 6 months at least, maybe up to a year, depending on what it is.
Yeah. You mentioned a salesperson who's entrepreneurial. And I think that spirit is hard to gauge. You can take somebody's word for it, but until they're actually, to lean on your analogy, in the driver's seat, you don't know how they're going to drive. Do you believe, and you come from an agency background, do you believe an agency background is essential to sell for an agency?
Good question. So the short answer is no, absolutely not. There's a few things to dig into there. So I don't necessarily believe in hiring an entrepreneurial salesperson. I think I probably used to think that. My personal belief is that kind of, it shows that the owners don't want to answer all the questions or haven't done the work to answer the hard questions yet. Because if you're saying you want an entrepreneurial salesperson, what you're saying is, I want somebody to figure this out for me.
Exactly.
As in, how do we get people to come to us, right? Guess what? Like, there's nobody, I mean, maybe not nobody, but there's probably nobody that you can afford that's going to be able to do that with the amount of time you need to do it in. So it's pretty much the owners, i.e., who are we targeting? Who are we a good fit for? How do we get them to agree to talk to us? How do we convert them? That said, you definitely want a salesperson that is proactive, that's self-starting, that's all the good things we want them to be. So beyond that, I think what goes into, an ideal complex service consultative sales hire. I think it's intelligence. I think that's really big. They need to be able to think on their feet. They need to be able to be sympathetic, empathetic. They need to be naturally curious. Are they asking you interesting, tough questions during the interview? Are they on the ball? Are they fastidious? All of those sorts of things go into it. If they have experience in your verticals, it's a plus. It's icing on the cake. I don't think it's necessary. I think they should have experience in similarly complex verticals, but they can learn that. And if you're over indexing on that, you might be letting people go that could be a good fit. Yeah.
Interesting. So you're less focused on vertical and also less focused on agency experience. They can learn how to talk web dev or branding or whatever, but it's more those really hard skills that they bring from the inside out of their personality and their core values, and how much are they showing up as a person.
Yeah, exactly. And a lot of that is because like the agency sales process is like you're moving people along to a stage where they're probably going to be talking to subject matter experts anyway, right? If it's actually getting to that proposal stage, that you don't need everybody to be an expert in all aspects of like coding and C++. That's probably anachronistic, whatever it is, like Python, et cetera, to close the deal, right? It's more about the skills that are transferable. I've always found that interesting because I actually think that if you wanted to transfer CMOs between verticals, it's way harder. You can't just drop in the CPG CMO into the tech world or whatever.
Right.
For salespeople, they really can bounce around a lot more easily. And I think it's because humans are the same. It's the same human wiring across the board. So, yeah.
Yeah. And if they think of it as human to human selling instead of B2B selling or B2C selling or whatever, at the end of the day, you're connecting with a person, and hopefully there's a trust, quotient there that they can rely on and say, here's what your need is. Here's what our solution is. Let's do some business.
Yeah, exactly. And then I think it's like anything else. Like I think when agency owners are hiring, the areas that they know, whether it's a designer or a media manager, whatever, there's a certain amount of training that they know is there. But for sales, it's kind of like, well, here's the Rolodex and let's put you on the ice float and good luck. Like, no, like even the good people, they need nurturing. They need somebody to listen to the calls and give feedback. It's hard. It takes time, but it's really worth it because it's extremely lucrative and it gets you out of one of the most time consuming parts of the business. It builds enterprise value the way nothing can if you ever want to sell the agency. So it's worth it. Yeah.
Yeah. That last part is clutch. It's typically the last thing that an owner holds on to that the business is reliant on them for is rev gen. And once they get themselves out of that seat and it can operate without them, but also grow without them, there's a lot of opportunity ahead from that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. I want to switch gears real quick, throw a couple random rapid fire questions out at you, and then let you go hit the jiu-jitsu mat. So first is what's something that you've integrated into your life recently, digital, physical, personal, professional, that you look back and you say, how the heck did I live without this thing?
Oh, that's a really good question. So my wife and I have had a newborn recently. So we have a baby boy who's like 1 year old. So awesome. I've started to just prioritize energy levels and fitness when I haven't before, because it just feels like more of a non-negotiable.
Yeah.
So that's involved like getting, blood tests and just kind of seeing where things are. So I definitely, it's not super expensive. I'm using a service called Next Health, which is pretty good. And not to go down too much of a tangent, but I feel like the U.S. healthcare system is very, it's very not preventative. It's very reactive to when you have a problem versus preventative. So if you can invest in preventative healthcare a little bit, it helps a lot. So that's been one of those things.
Check it out. Awesome. Love that. And then what's something that you just can't get enough of these days? A show, a book, a hobby, a podcast, or whatever?
Ooh, good question. I've been really enjoying My First Million podcast for business in general. It's fun. They're just lighthearted. So I've been getting a lot from that. Oldie but a goodie friends of mine is Tropical MBA, which is focused on what used to be kind of lifestyle digital nomad entrepreneurship. It has now changed, I think, post 2020. So that one I enjoy. Books I'm reading lately, I've been working my way through the Robert Caro, Lyndon B. Johnson series, the biographies, which is just really great window into U.S. history, into just how somebody that's like a psychotic, power hungry person, but yet one person can like cause so much change for better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
That's been pretty interesting. Those are a few things that come to mind.
Very cool. Awesome. Good stuff. Good diversity there. And then finally, what's an invaluable piece of business advice that you can share with the listeners?
Really good question. I mean, I think this might be a little bit more tactical than other pieces of advice, but I think it applies to what we were talking about earlier, is really just starting with who's doing this stuff, who's doing what, as opposed to anything tactical, as opposed to the what or the how, right? And I think that when you get into that, then you can really set expectations for your own life, get out ahead of stuff, and make things happen much easier than if you're just sort of jumping on different tactics.
Love that. Very cool. Dan, always a font of knowledge. I appreciate you. Everybody should check out your Sales Schema podcast. Great audience, great lineup of presenters there as well, or guests rather. And thank you very much for your time today. And I appreciate you joining us.
Yeah, thanks so much, Steve. And just to leave you guys with one thing, if you guys want to learn any more about outreach or DIYing a lot of the stuff, salesschema.com/agency outsight. And that goes to our latest video training.
Awesome. I'll drop that in the notes and send people that way. Thanks, Dan.
Thank you, sir. Always a pleasure.
Thanks again for tuning in to Agency Bytes. If you know someone with expert knowledge on a topic that agency owners would love to hear about, go to agencyoutsight.com/podcast-guest and nominate them.